Before we dive into this powerful and emotional journey of Edith, the wife of Lot, make sure you subscribe to this channel, tap the bell so you never miss a story, and share this video if you believe God's mercy is still greater than judgment. Now, get ready for a story that will shake your soul, stir your heart, and reveal the high price of looking back when God tells you to move forward. She was not named in the Bible, but her story made the heavens pause. Her soul was woven into the history of fire and brimstone, etched in salt and frozen forever in a moment of fatal hesitation. Some call her Lot's wife, but let us call her Edith, a woman who once lived in a city of wickedness, walked beside a man of righteousness, and stood at the very edge of salvation only to turn around. And the story, it begins long before the infamous backward glance. It begins when she left everything familiar to follow her husband into a promise, a wilderness, and eventually a firestorm from heaven. Edith's life started in the land of Ur, the same land where Abraham, Lot's uncle, had received the call from God to leave his country, his people, and his father's household. Lot had followed Abraham like a shadow, and where Lot went, Edith followed. The young woman, perhaps once from a noble family, perhaps drawn to Lot's quiet wisdom or Abraham's strange faith, left everything behind and became part of a journey that would one day rewrite the story of human history. She walked desert roads, pitched tents beside dusty wells, and watched stars with promises hanging in them. In those early days, Edith admired Abraham. He was a man who prayed without temples and believed without seeing. His wife, Sarah, carried grace like wind carries fragrance, and their camp was filled with songs and strange hope. But Edith longed for something more. Though the wilderness had its quiet beauty, her heart yearned for the sounds of cities, laughter, music, market chatter, perfume-scented halls. So, when strife grew between Abraham's herders and Lot's, and Abraham offered Lot the chance to choose where to settle, Edith's heart leapt when she saw where Lot's eyes turned. There it was, the well-watered plains of the Jordan Valley, green, lush, glittering, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. And nestled within that seductive land were the twin cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. To some, they were cities of sin. To Edith, they looked like home. Lot chose the plains, and Edith believed her prayers had been answered. They moved their tents closer and closer to Sodom until the day they finally entered its gates. The city welcomed them with open arms, for Lot was a man of wealth and dignity, and Edith, with her grace and noble bearing, quickly made friends among the wives of rulers, merchants, and judges. Her life became a rhythm of feasts and fabrics, markets and music, gold bracelets and echoing laughter. She bore Lot daughters. Some say they had sons too, though unnamed and possibly lost in the tide of judgment. Her daughters grew up in Sodom, learning the songs of the city, wearing its silks, speaking its tongue. And Edith? She built a home, perhaps even a palace, on the hills overlooking the sinful splendor. She lit candles every evening and whispered old prayers she half remembered. But Sodom had changed her. Slowly, subtly. She no longer spoke of Abraham's God at dinners. She no longer prayed before meals. Her daughters married men of Sodom, and that was fine. That was culture. That was life. That was compromise. Lot, however, remained different. He sat at the city gate, a place of authority and decision-making. But he never truly fit in. The men of Sodom tolerated him, perhaps respected his wealth, but they mocked his values. He never stopped believing in the God of Abraham. But he had grown quiet, perhaps for Edith's sake, perhaps for peace in the home, perhaps because even a righteous man can get tired of shouting into the wind. Then came the night of angels. They arrived as strangers, dusty travelers at dusk. Lot saw them and immediately knew they were not ordinary men. He insisted they come into his home, and Edith, as always, obeyed her husband's urgency. But she noticed the way he trembled, the way he whispered instead of spoke. The visitors ate with them, and there was tension in the air like lightning before a storm. And then it began, a pounding at the door, a crowd of Sodom's men, young and old, shouting, demanding the strangers be brought out for unspeakable acts. Lot, desperate, begged them to reconsider. He even offered his daughters, yes, his own flesh and blood, as a trade, hoping their innocence would shame the crowd into backing down. Edith heard every word. Her heart cracked, her eyes welled. What madness was this? What evil had they welcomed into their lives? Before the crowd could break the door, the strangers revealed their true power. In a flash of divine wrath, they struck the men blind. Panic erupted. The house shook with the presence of heaven. And then the pronouncement fell like thunder. We are here to destroy this place. The outcry of its wickedness has reached the Lord. You must leave. Now. Edith could hardly breathe. Leave? Leave the city? Leave her home, her daughter's husbands, her possessions, her memories? The angels told Lot, take your wife and your daughters. Do not look back. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away. They hesitated. Of course they did. When you build your life somewhere, even if it is in a broken place, even if judgment is coming, it is hard to let go. The angels seized Lot, Edith, and their 2 unmarried daughters by the hand and dragged them out of the city. Mercy pulled them out. Morning broke, and the sun began to rise over the valley. As they reached the outskirts, Edith turned. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe her mother's heart could not bear leaving her married daughters behind. Maybe she thought of the curtains she hand-stitched, or the courtyard with the jasmine tree. Maybe she remembered a conversation, a laugh, a moment of love, and she looked. It was not just a glance. It was a longing. It was a clinging to what God had commanded to leave behind. And in that moment, time stopped. Edith became a pillar of salt, and there she stood, no longer Edith the wife, Edith the mother, Edith the dreamer of cities. She was now a monument, white, coarse, motionless, on the edge of ruin, a statue sculpted not by hands, but by the grief of rebellion. The salty winds of the plain howled around her. Ashes from Sodom's fall danced like black snow through the morning sky. Lot did not look back. He could not because he had no sorrow, but because he had no permission. The command had been clear, do not look back, keep going. The fire rained from heaven like vengeance stored up for centuries. It was not a wildfire or volcano. It was holy judgment, unfiltered and unrestrained. The sky itself seemed to burn, and the cities of the plain, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, all collapsed in heat and ash. The very land buckled. Smoke rose like the breath of a furious god, and where there had once been homes, laughter, and the fragrance of gardens, there was now silence and sulfur. Lot and his daughters ran until their legs could carry them no more. They reached Zoar, a little town spared by divine mercy. But nothing was little any more. Lot had lost everything, his home, his friends, his wife, the woman who once walked beside him through the deserts. who bore his children, who built their household in the wicked city, gone. Her figure, frozen in salt, became a whisper of warning for all who passed the region. And what of Edith's soul? What of her thoughts in that final moment when her eyes turned? Did she regret it instantly? Did she whisper her daughters' names? Did she call to God in terror? Did she even mean to disobey? Or was it simply the aching reflex of a woman who could not bear to sever her heart from her past? We do not know. Scripture leaves her nameless, but her fate speaks louder than her name ever could. The daughters of Lot, now motherless, watched their father break in spirit. He no longer sought community. He no longer sat at city gates or made decisions among men. He took his girls and went up into the mountains. There, in a cave, they lived in isolation, physically saved but emotionally scattered. The story takes a darker turn. The daughters, believing the whole world had perished, feared their family line would vanish. In desperation, and perhaps a twisted echo of Sodom's influence, they got their father drunk and each lay with him on successive nights. From this act, two nations were born, Moab and Ammon, and so the legacy of Edith continues in a strange way, not through her own life, for she looked back and perished, but through the lives of her daughters, who bore sons who would later become enemies of Israel, Moabites and Ammonites, people who carried the blood of Lot, but not always the blessing. And yet, the story is not all tragedy. Generations passed. Moab grew into a nation with its own customs, its own gods, its own politics. And from Moab, many years later, came a woman named Ruth, a widow, a foreigner, a Moabitess. She chose not to look back. When her mother-in-law Naomi told her to return to her people, Ruth replied, "Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God." And because she moved forward, Ruth became the great-grandmother of King David. She stepped into the lineage of the Messiah. Imagine that. Descendants from Lot's bloodline entering into the family tree of Jesus. So Edith's legacy, though marked by disobedience, is not erased entirely. For in the strange way God works, even a tragedy can be woven into a greater tapestry of redemption. But let us return to that moment on the plain. The pillar of salt. Why salt? Why not stone or ash? Salt in the Bible is a symbol of covenant and preservation, a preservative, a witness, a purifier, a warning. Edith became all of those. Her body preserved as a warning for every generation, her image a silent sermon. You can be halfway out of sin and still die if your heart refuses to let go. You can be led by angels, touched by mercy, running toward salvation, and still perish if you long for what God already condemned. Jesus himself remembered her. In the Gospel of Luke, when speaking of the coming of the kingdom, he simply said, "Remember Lot's wife." Just that. A three-word command, not "remember David's victories" or "remember Moses' courage." Remember Lot's wife. Because in her story is the cost of hesitation, the danger of divided loyalty, the tragedy of delayed obedience. How many people today are just like Edith, standing at the edge of deliverance, but looking back at what they left behind, wanting freedom, but also missing the comfort of chains, their hearts still in Sodom while their feet pretend to follow God. Edith is not just a figure in salt. She is a mirror. She is a checkpoint. She is a question. Where is your gaze fixed? And Lot? He lived the rest of his days remembering her. Every campfire must have cast a shadow that reminded him of the flame. Every night, must have echoed with memories of laughter now lost. He may have kept the earrings she wore or the scarf she left behind. And in every prayer, every sigh, every silent tear, her name lived on even though her body never moved again. To some, Edith's story ends in failure, but to the discerning heart, it ends in warning and even deeper in opportunity. For if we learn from her, if we heed the lesson, then her salt becomes our seasoning. Her frozen glance becomes our forward step. Her pause becomes our push. Do not look back when God calls you forward. Do not anchor your soul to places God is destroying. Do not hesitate when angels pull you toward mercy. The cost of looking back might not be immediate, but it is eternal. And when we remember Edith, not with mockery but with awe, we remember the holiness of obedience and the power of trust. For in the fire and the salt, in the scream and the silence, God still calls us out of Sodom, out of compromise, out of comfort, into His promise, into His mercy, into a future. So run from what is burning, run toward what is promised, and whatever you do, do not look back. If this story stirred your heart, drop a comment with a fire emoji, subscribe for more powerful Bible stories, and share this with someone who needs the courage to leave the past behind. Edith's story is more than salt and sorrow. It is a lesson for every soul walking out of darkness and into the light.